Hello, my name is Frank Aldino. I'm president with OPN.Ninja. Today, I'm fortunate enough to be here with Jeffery Potvin. Jeffery is our CEO for OPN.Ninja, and I invited him to speak today at our upsales event in Whitby with the town of Whitby and the Business Advisory Center of Durham. We had about 100 people in the room, and the audience was very stoked. Jeffery, you did an excellent job, I have to say. It's actually neat as a partner that I learned stuff about you that I didn't even know. But the one thing that really struck me is the fact of not only bringing the value, but having a long-term plan and how you're going to get there. So would you mind just elaborating a little bit on, if I am a startup or if I am in business, what would be maybe the top 2 or 3 things that I should do to set my course?
For sure. I think when it comes to planning, and I'm probably the worst at all planning when it comes to all of this, oh my God, what do I got to do? I think the key is that you sit down and envision where you want to be in the next 10 years. Where do you want to be personally? Where do you want to be as a business? And if that business is, I want to be the best investor, then you got to figure out what are all of those things I need to do to be the best investor. And what that comes down to is I got to be part of screening committees. I got to be part of the big shows. I got to sit in front of startups. So there's all of these elements that you have to start thinking about that will start to build a brand around why you're going to be the best investor. So from any other startup, it's kind of doing the exact same, being methodical enough to say, okay, well, if I'm going to be a software company in 10 years, if I'm going to be the best custom built software, everybody needs to know about that. How do I build that vision around it? So pick 1 or 2, 3 things that you need to do, get in front of those groups and be consistent, build relations. There's in Durham, you have, in all the regions, you have all of these committee meetings and groups that you can be part of. Figure out how you get into them. The best story that I could share about this was there was a group of guys from the Oshawa, and they created a beer company. And what they did is they went and said, we're going to be the best beer company. We're going to get into the grocery stores everywhere. So what did they do? They joined every committee. They were part of every single thing going on in the region. And guess whose beer was the first beer in the supermarket?
Theirs.
All or nothing. So I totally have huge respect for that because they planned it not knowing that they were planning it. It was, I have a goal. In order to be the best, I got to work my way through those.
For me personally, Jeffery, that's very insightful. We've done 14 of these up sales talks, bringing in individuals. OPN has been there from the very beginning. They're one of the best attended in the Durham region. And I got to tell you, Jeffery, that was one of the best ones that we've had. And I mean that truly, not because you're just my business partner, but because it was very one-to-one. I think you related on a personal level to each one. I had nothing but great compliments on the way out. And some asked me if I can bring you back. So you're part of OPN. If you want to come back, you're welcome anytime. But again, Jeffery provided 10 different things that you should look at to do sales. And of course, the one that really stuck with me is the one about, you mentioned the one about, sorry, forgive me. I'm trying to think all the 10, but the one that really pushed me was the one about compelling. Making sure you have a compelling story to tell and be compelling in your sales. Can you just touch a little bit on that?
For sure. The compelling side is that we all go into something with the same approach. And we don't find ways to be different, offsetting the way that our approach may be or what we're trying to sell. So be compelling by providing a value that keeps them wanting what you're doing. Make it exciting, make it different, make them understand that this is a long-term solution, that they're going to get a lot out of this. Be different. At the end of the day, if you're not going to be a little bit different, you're like everybody else, then they'll not be memorable. So how do I build something that is compelling enough that people are going to say, you know what, you're right, I do need that. And that's by working all these different groups, getting people familiar with you, and making sure that when you do come across, people are buying your brand. They're buying into you. So you're going to provide some sort of great offer, and that they're going to say, you know what, you got execution, you got it supported, I'm in. And that all takes time to build up in coaching. So it's compelling is something a little bit different than the rest.
It does sound easy, but it's obviously not. I encourage you to come out to these upsales. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that are just starting up, and they're going to share their journey. Of course, Jeffery will be with us at the rest. I just had the BACD ask us if we can run this for a 3rd year.
Oh, congratulations.
So I think you pushed it over the top. So I'm not sure if I should say thank you or I should say, you son of a gun, now we got another year of this. But anyway, really enjoyed today's session. Jeffery was very, very motivational. And the whole concept behind these upsales is to inspire individuals that you too can do it, and that there's always going to be people like Jeffery there that can help you on your journey. So check us out, OPN.Ninja.
website, we have the list upcoming for this year, and then again, we will be doing it next year as well. So I'm really excited about our speaker. I'm going to let Frank introduce our speaker. But Frank, I just wanted to say thank you very much for the partnership that we have and all the great speakers that you're bringing on. We're really trying to raise the consciousness of businesses in Durham region. Let's all work together and raise each other up and create successful businesses so that we create jobs for the future and we create businesses that are successful and sustainable. You're going to hear from Jeffrey in a little while. I like to call him a serial entrepreneur that likes to climb mountains. So speak to him about that afterwards. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Teresa. Good morning. So welcome. We were just saying that this is our 14th session today. And first of all, I want to thank you because I know you folks had a choice today and you chose to be with us. So thank you very much. It's a little bit of a special day for me today because I'm going to be introducing Jeffrey. And Jeffrey's not only an awesome, by the way, I want to have a contest how many awesomes he will say in 45 minutes. You're going to hear quite a few. I actually met Jeffrey at a Startup Durham event, and to be quite honest, when I first met him, the man bun kind of threw me off. So, but I got to know him, and when we started doing this event, I approached Jeffrey. At that time, he had a company, he still does, it's called Hardboot, and it's a software company. And they launched, I won't give away his whole presentation, but they launched a pitches series allowing entrepreneurs to get in front of an audience, angel investors. And last night we were downtown at City Hall where we had about 300 people with Mayor Tory there as well. So Jeffrey started that as Hardboot sponsoring it. So I asked him if he can video and live stream this event. And from there, of course, we introduced an accelerator, and then we also introduced the $1 Million Fund, and of course the pitches series. So I'm a little bit excited today because, first of all, I'm 55, and he's the only guy that calls me dude, so I appreciate that. When we were putting the lineup, we wanted to make sure that we have people that have done it, been there, can share, startups. So our June speaker, for example, is a friend that Jeffrey introduced me to. His name is Tim, and he owns a company called Rover, which is for all the parking spots in downtown Toronto. So the whole idea is, as Teresa said, is bringing individuals here that can share their journey and inspire us to want to do better. Because at the end of the day, without sales, it's like having that great Ferrari in the car, but if you haven't got any gas, it just isn't moving. So it's a very special for me today because Jeffrey's now my business partner. And along with another gentleman, Angelo, who is our engineer. Jeffrey used to run Loblaw's IT. And then of course we have Katarina in the back, who's our marketing communication. So we created this team, and this is what allows us right now to do it. So I will read his bio, but again, I really encourage you to write down how many awesomes you will hear in 45 minutes. Jeffrey, he is an outdoors dude, very much so. The joke with our lawyer is, Frank, is Jeffrey gone to ride Galapagos turtles again? Because he's that kind of individual. So I think you're going to enjoy his story this morning. I hope I'm not embarrassing you, JP. He really does not like to talk about himself, so I like to talk about him, okay? Before I get going and introduce Jeffrey, I just want to give a little shout out. There's a young man in the room, Gregory. Gregory's with Startup Canada. Gregory, would you mind just standing up for a second, buddy? Hi, Gregory. Gregory is an amazing young man and volunteer, but we almost lost him in January. He was in the hospital for a couple of months. He was in a coma for 5 days. This is his first up sales. He didn't miss any. So I just want to welcome you here, Gregory, and we're so happy to have you. All right, so I'm going to introduce Jeffrey, but again, I'm a little bit biased because I'm honored to have him as my business partner. We make an amazing team. When everybody starts talking to me about IT technologies, my eyes kind of go like a deer in the headline. I say, you can talk to Jeffrey. So Jeffery Potvin is a lifelong entrepreneur with a proven track record of building companies and reinventing existing businesses. He loves working with great startups to a list of great clients and employers over the years. He's been with Loblaw, he's been with Caboose, Bayer, First National, BBD, founder and CEO of Hardboot, which is a software company that actually is doing all these events for us. Hardboot is a custom mobile web development shop and the driving force behind the OPN, which stands for Open People Network. And it's basically an entrepreneurial community that helps startups grow their businesses and achieve funding through their Accelerator and Supporters Fund. So if you need funding, talk to us. Of course, Jeffrey's also very active in the angel space. That's where I met him, and he came into the angel community. And now, of course, he sits on the screening committee at York Angels. He's a member of Spark Angels. He's a member of G10, which is Golden Triangle and Angel Network, and so on. So the whole idea there is the more relationships we have with angel groups across Ontario, we're helping to get people funding. Jeffery Potvin is an affluent investor, as I mentioned. He is also a mentor and a teacher at Seneca College. And I won't take any more time up telling you about him, but I am delighted to introduce him not only as our speaker today, but a good friend and my business partner. Jeffery?
Morning, how's everybody doing? You guys are stealing my lines. I noticed that last night we do the 30-second pitch where at the event you can come up and you speak for 30 seconds. And what we do with that is that the transition is, I always say, and what's your name? So people are starting to catch on. So now they come up and they're actually 28 seconds and they turn and say their name now. And I'm like, you're stealing my lines, man. I'm going to change this program. So I'm going to have to come up with a new word, but I'm going to think about that. So I appreciate it, and thank you very much for everybody coming out today. The first thing I want to do, because I know it's kind of warm in here, so everybody just jump up for a second. All right, we're going to start with jumping jacks. We're going to do 10. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is, a couple of years ago, I went into a meeting. Actually, I've done this quite a few times, but one in particular, I went into a meeting, and I started walking around, and I was high-fiving everybody. And while I was doing this, one person turned to me and said, "That's very unprofessional of you." And what I did is I turned back and I laid her the high five. And I just wanted to say that today, you guys are important people. You're awesome at what you do. So a great way to introduce yourself is a high five. I love high fives, so high five the people around you. And you know what? Eventually, yes. One, it feels good. Two, puts a smile on your face. And who doesn't love a high five? And the business guys over here, the banking guys need some high fives. I'm going to high five some banking guys. All right, guys. All right. Thank you. Have a seat. Have a seat. I'm not sure where the camera is. Is that it? All right, perfect. So today I kind of have, I guess, a different, I rewrote this thing like 7 times. I have never prepared so much for a talk ever. I just put a couple words on a slide and just let it roll. But today I kind of started to analyze the things that I had done over the years and wanted to figure out how and why I worked the way I did. And the way I want to kind of bring it up is that I thought, well, why don't I do it as more of a case study and talk to, I guess that slide was supposed to be first. What I wanted to do is first start off by doing a case study, but first kind of give a question to you guys. How many people here in the room like change? Well, now you're debating. You're like, well, I don't know. How are you analyzing change? So most of you probably said, I love change. Correct? Fair assumption? Well, change is actually the worst, hardest thing in the world to do. And the reason why I say that, studies, everything has proven this, is that it's stressful. Because we're all used to doing the same thing day in and day out. So technically, we're kind of like a robot. We're all very mechanical. We figure out what is going to get me from A to B to C. And then we enact that all the time. So as an example, this morning when you came here or woke up, you put your cell phone in the same pocket. You ate probably close to the same breakfast. You probably engaged your morning phone the same way. That sounds funny, your morning phone. You started to read and do the things that you always do every morning. And you'll do this throughout the day. So change is actually something that we fear. And it's because it's not planned. They call it the elephant in the room, where somebody brings something up and everybody becomes, oh my God, this is crazy. I might lose my job. I might not understand how to do this. I don't know how to work around this. So change becomes very important to us when we're going through our day, but we don't want it. We want to control it. We want to manage it. So because it becomes hard, When it comes into sales, you start to think, well, how do I get out in front of people and sell? How do I get people to want what I have? Well, you have to kind of start to think about, how do I change to adapt to those instances of things that are going to occur? How do I adapt to those people? And our biggest fear is that I'm just going to talk about what I'm good at and hopefully they want to buy it. And I'm sure you've all done that. You're going in just like blah, 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 blah. And you're waiting for that reaction. But you didn't take the time to actually figure out that other person. Why do they want to buy? What do they need? So there's all of these different mechanisms that we don't really tend to pay attention to, because we don't really want change. We're just used to doing what we need. Social media, all of these things came into the funnel over the last 10 years, and we all had to start to shift and change a little bit. Start to think, okay, well, here's different ways and mechanisms to talk to people. Here's different ways to do X and Y. So what I want to do is give you a little bit of a case study of something that I had gone through 10 years ago, and I have lots of many interesting, I guess, more comical self-stories that have occurred, and then I started to analyze why these were important and why they can help you or help anybody, including myself, to think about before I go into a meeting or the way I operate in order to get the outcome I'm looking for. So the case study will use BMO as the fictitious name. It's not really BMO. So 10 years ago, I think it was, I guess it would have been about close to 15 years ago, I had met this gentleman. He owned an agency, software marketing agency, and he sat down with me and he said, he took me out for lunch, and an hour lunch turned into 3 hours. And he basically, at the end of the conversation, he told me, Jeffrey, you mitigate risk. That's how you work and operate. And I'm here to change your life. You're going to come work for me, and I'm going to teach you how to do sales. And I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. I'm a software guy. He's going to teach me how to do sales. And through the whole conversation, he was trying to explain to me that in order for me to be able to grow, I needed to learn all these different techniques, and he was going to be able to teach them to me. So I went in, I met his team, and we started to go through all of these different details. And then he said to me, Jeffrey, you need to take this test. Sorry. It's already starting to talk too much.
You just wrote in the water.
Oh, and flow water. So the test he got me to take was a Myers-Briggs test. Has anybody heard of the test before? So I took the test. A week later, he comes back and he says, Jeffrey, it's not going to work out. I was like, okay, all right, well. So I just left it at that. I didn't really inquire. I just assumed that maybe I failed. And I didn't know you could fail a test that was an open test, right? So about 2 months went by, and this is when I first went on my own and I started to work, or hustling, whatever you want to call it, trying to figure out where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And I got a call back from the company. They said, Jeffrey, we can't find anybody. We've been trying very hard. We're going to take the chance and have you come work with us. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. It kind of feels like it was a punch in the face, but you're like, hey, why not? So I did. I went and I sat there, and we sat down and we went through, and they said, okay, BMO, what we're going to do is this is what you're going to sell. You need to get in front of the top 100 companies of the 500 in Canada, and you need to sell this solution into them. Here's all the material, here's everything you need. So I guess I do what I do best at that time, which was I took all this information and I started to go through and archive every single thing, going through how I'm going to do this, where I need information. And I started to dig up a storyline of where I wanted to be and how I wanted to get there. So as I was going through all this information, I started to build using Microsoft Excel how I was going to get in front of 100 of these top 500 companies. I didn't have names, I didn't have any information about them. And this was 12 years ago, so I don't know, maybe the information wasn't as easy to find, but using LinkedIn, everything I possibly could, I started to go through and methodically build out how I was going to get this end result, which for me was I needed 100% close. I needed to sell them on BMO products and make sure that every one of these top 100 companies had an answer for me. I had a meeting and I went through everything. So 3 months went by and I had been giving them updates and I had a very high close percentage, and the boss wasn't impressed. He didn't understand why. It's like, you failed the test, buddy. You shouldn't be doing so well. So he then sat me in a meeting. He asked me to book the meeting, the next one. He said, I want to attend the meeting with you. And I said, oh, all right, fine, no worries. Maybe I was nervous, I'm not too sure. But he came into the meeting, and after we finished the meeting and I had closed the meeting off, he pulled me into another room and he apologized. And he said, this is the first time I've hired anybody in 40 years that didn't meet the requirements of what the test was. He said, the test told me you were too methodical and you could never close a deal. And I never thought too much about why that was, but in his mind, he was taking this test as being the ultimate end goal, which was, I need people that do X, and that's the only way I'm going to get that function done. So what did I learn from that is that he then came back and said, Jeffrey, we're going to give you a job. We want you to be VP of sales, and we're going to offer you all this stuff. And I was kind of blown away. And I remember to the date, I was standing in a hallway on the 23rd floor of a building downtown, and I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And I called him and said, no, thank you. And the reason why I called him and said no thank you is because what it did is it triggered in my mind that I actually could do what he said I couldn't do. And I started to try to figure out what were those elements that allowed me to be methodical and all these other things. And what I learned over the time was that I started to kind of study how I approached and attacked a problem to create a solution. And so this is kind of where it gets into the 10 big picture steps, if you will, of what I would go through when I started to look at problems and how I wanted to solve them in order to generate sales. So the first one was that you need motivation. Everybody here, I'm assuming you all got up this morning because you had something that motivated you to come today. What was that? What was the reason you decided to come here today?
To hear you.
That's an amazing answer. Get that guy some flow water. Awesome is good too. So outside of because of, I guess, getting to come and hear me rant, but what was the reason, what was the motivation that got you to come today?
To learn something.
You wanted to do change.
To learn something.
You wanted to learn something new.
To get my pitch better.
To get your pitch better.
Networking people.
Meet new people, networking. So you all have reasons why you came today. So when it comes to sales, you have to have motivation. And the key pieces to motivation, you fit into buckets. When I worked with salespeople over the last 10 years, I used to say to them, there's 3 things that I want when it comes to anything I do in a transaction. I either want to learn something, I either want to network like hell, or I want to make a lot of money. I really suck at the money part. So there was 2 things that I was really influenced by, and that was I wanted to meet people and I wanted to learn. Because I always said that the more I learn, the better I will be in the future. Which means that I'm a future planner. It means that I need to be here in 20 years. So how am I going to get there? I need to start now by doing all these different elements that are going to get me there. So those are the 3 things that I always looked at. So in your motivation, the key is that you have to understand what your motivation is. If you don't have one, you're not going to get anywhere. So write that down. Start your day, start your business plan, start your week, write down what your motivation is. Where am I going to end up at the end of this week? Where am I going to end up at the end of the year? And why is that important? It gives you a target. And everybody used to say targets, so I don't need those. When I first started my company, I sat down with a gentleman and he said, Jeffrey, you need an exit. I said, man, I haven't even started. This is an idea. He's like, you need one. And I never understood that. It didn't really sink in why I needed to figure out how to get out before I got in. And what I realized was that the reason I had to get the exit was because it gave me the motivation to figure out how to get there. And if you understand how to get there, then everything becomes that much easier. You start to build steps in order to achieve that. So I implore you that when you do start your week or you start your day, have some sort of objective of what you're trying to achieve, which goes right down to the tactics when it comes to a meeting. So you're now motivated. You've got the reasons why you're doing all this. Well, how many people here, when you first came in this morning, how many people went in and wanted to figure out, how many people said they were new today? Okay, a lot of people. Awesome. So when you came, how many people did some research on the event? All right. Like, you're not going to be like, no, I did, man. That's terrible news. I'm not doing it. So the reason why I asked that is because the benefit of research, and research being king, is that that information now allows you to own the cards in any sort of transaction. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're going through, learn about all the players in the room. Learn about the business. Learn everything you possibly can about that. And the reason why this benefits you, multiple reasons, is that when questions come up, you have the ability to now throw anecdotal information back that shows that you're actually genuinely engaged. Why is that important? Because people are there, they want to build comfort. And the way to build comfort with somebody is to be able to share information that you actually understand their business, you understand about their business, and you understand all the details that are going on around it. So when I teach 1 day a week at Seneca College in Newnham campus, and it's part of the Helix program, so it's the entrepreneurship side. And I always, when I talk to the students, I always kind of set them up with, they have to have a reason why they're doing something, but research the hell out of it. So even when they're coming in to do a pitch in front of the class, I get them to understand everything that's going on in that environment. And the reason why this gets them prepared is that when they start to go into other meetings and start to talk to people and get out into the real world, they're going to right away understand the amount of work that you have to put into in order to go and sit in front of somebody. It's not just a, hey, I'm here to talk. I have to actually do some work, and I have to learn and do as much research as I can. So, as an example, this was a few years ago, maybe it's 20 years ago, I worked at Loblaws, and we had one of the vice presidents of IT had come up with a solution, and he started pinpointing everybody in the room on what they needed to do. And we created a steering committee. And he gave everybody a month to do the work. And I'm sure everybody waited to the last minute to do the work. And it was coding a whole section database and a bunch of things. So I actually went in and started doing the work. But I had no interest to actually go in and pitch this, because I just thought it was boring and that there was no outcome. So the night before, I had done all the work. I was going to avoid the meeting. And at the time, my mentor, or I guess boss, had given me, you need to do this, this is going to be good for you. And every time I felt that everything I shouldn't do, because I didn't want to, is the reason why I should have went and did it. So every time I kind of tried to talk myself out of something, I would go and do it, and it was always the best outcome. So in this case, I went in to this meeting, and everybody was presenting all their solutions. And I think I waited maybe 20, 30 minutes before I just snapped. I couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, man, IT guys are boring, they don't talk, they can't get anything out. After a while, I just took control of the whole meeting. And I was like, you did this, we're gonna do this, structured all of this, went up, this is how it's gonna be done, we built it this way, we did that, all right, done, I'm out of here. And I left, and it was legitimately kind of like that. And when I left the meeting, the vice president of IT came up to my desk and invited me out for lunch and said, Jeffrey, this is what you're gonna do for me. And my whole job changed after that. I became, they wouldn't give me a title, so I was called Guru. I didn't understand why. I'm like, shouldn't I get a real title, like analyst or something? They're like, no, you're going to be a guru. So I just became a guy that knew a lot of stuff. But the reason why that was important was that because I took the initiative to actually understand everything I possibly could about the solution, about the problem, about the players in the room. And it makes a difference when you're trying to close a deal. And I think it sounds basic and you're like, wow, I do that already. Well, do you really actually do that? Do you really take the time to understand everything about it? And it is being methodical. So knowledge is king, research, plan, execute. So the next one is kind of, you need to be compelling. We can all send an email and say, hey, I have some interest here, buy my stuff. And you kind of get that look of like, ah, great, another email, another sales funnel. Well, when I was working on the BMO project, I had to become methodical enough to understand that if I was going to be able to close 100% or 100 of the 500 companies, I needed to be able to do certain things that would engage these businesses. One, I didn't have contacts, I didn't have any relationships, and I had 6 months to close the contract. So in this case, I set my target that I wanted to do all this relatively quick. So I put together that spreadsheet, which started to take care of when I talked to them, how I talked to them, how I got in front of them, who introduced me, who could introduce me to these people. And in my earlier days when online trading became popular, I wanted to master the role of how I could learn more about the company fast. So it was through research and people, made a lot of phone calls, made a lot of coffees, and I started to really understand how to break down the information that was important about that company to find out where the problems were. Back in the day, I may have been a bit of a hack, and I learned how to do phishing, which was you call people and get them to tell you information about the company and the problems they have, and then you go in and sell back to them. Has anybody ever done that? Yeah, there's one IT guy back there. Yeah, man, I do it all the time. So yes, phishing is still allowed, and really what you're doing is you're just asking the right questions, triggers that get people to share information. And so you do this quite frequently. And these are some of the things that I did in order to get this spreadsheet to get to the outcome I was looking for. And everything sounds like, oh my God, it must take you like 6 months to close something. Yes, you're methodical, and yes, you're thinking big, but at the end of the day, you have to bring some value. And you have to really understand, what is my compelling offer that I'm going to do? And in any relationship that you start to create, there has to be two sides to the coin. People always ask me, how do you know when you're onto something, and how do you feel like you should run away? Well, in any relationship, when you've been accepted, it's a two-way chase. Correct? You start to talk to them, and they talk to you back. How many people find that they spend 90% of their time trying to reach somebody, and they don't reach back? Get that often? Well, that's because you haven't created something compelling enough. I haven't created something that's engaged that other person, and the email or whatever it is, and bugging them hasn't come through because they haven't understand the value of what you're trying to pitch. So you need to change and alter the word change. You need to change and alter how you're approaching that type of person. So we talked earlier about the Myers-Briggs and being a different subset. Well, this is where I started to learn a bit more about myself and found out what my characteristics were, which was I'm an INTJ. So introverted, methodical, I don't remember all the other words mean. So a lot of other stuff. What's that?
Thinker and judgmental.
There you go. I didn't want anybody to know that. So I've been judging all of you. But really, at the end of the day, what that did was, it meant that because you're methodical, you started to have a plan. You started to have to think about, how can I approach these things differently? So where I say that it's a two-way relationship, if you start to think about your personal self, my friends, why are they all similar to me? Why are all of these other people that I hired on my team similar to me? Because you go to what you know, you go to what's easy. Well, when you go to do sales, you're not going to be working with personalities that are the same as yours or like yours. So you start to have to analyze that quickly. So why does it make sense for you to know more about yourself? Well, because if you know more about yourself, then you know what the attributes are, which means that when you're going to talk to somebody, I can start to analyze you quite quickly and figure out how to make my approach different so that it will stand out to your personality, which is be compelling. And be compelling is all about understanding the other person you're trying to sell to. Figure it out, ask questions, research them, find out if they like sports, find out if they like this. All of those things actually matter because that's how you're going to relate to that person's personality. So that it's a two-way chase, because nobody likes to send an email and not get a response. So the next thing that I think you really start to drive off of is team. You're not a one-man show, and if you are a one-man show, figure out how to bring other people in when you need them. So throughout my career, I started to sell a lot of different ways, software and different solutions. And one of the things that I did is I built up a roster of great people. And those great people were always able to step into what I was doing for 5 minutes, half an hour, 1 meeting, 2 meetings, whatever that might be. And this became valuable because I knew I couldn't adjust everybody's personality. I couldn't sell everybody perfectly. And I didn't want to just sell to introverts because, man, that would take you forever. So I started to find people that actually had the skills that I didn't carry. And I brought them to meetings. I'd pay them to come to meetings. And you know what? At the end of the day, those people were then able to make that connection, which actually helped generate the business I was looking for. So I was methodical, I came up with a plan, and that plan was I need to find the right people at the right time to bring into that room. So what that means is that you're going to have a couple of, I call it 2 for 1. So every time you go to a meeting, if they're going to bring 2 people, you're going to bring 1. They're going to bring 4, you're going to bring 2. So that you're always able to start learning, paying attention, and countering how people's personalities are going to work in that room. Because your end result is I need to close that deal. So, learn the people, lead the room. So this is one of the things that I learned over time that I actually became, not even knowing I was doing it, because it happened so frequently. And that was, I started to pay attention in meetings quite a bit, and I learned this from my first boss. When I was, we'd be in meetings, and if I had an idea, I would just share it. And it didn't matter if it was the other business owners and what they thought. I would just be like, this is how you're going to win and do this. Because I already overanalyzed your business, and this is what you need to do because you're sucking at it. And they might not have been happy to hear that. And then one day my boss took me aside and said, Jeffrey, you need to be more political. You need to find a way to get everybody to understand how you're doing something, and that way you'll win. So I thought about it, and I said, okay, I agree. I'm going to take people aside, give them some information, and let them win. And that's what I did. So I started to kind of help push that through. And where that came from was actually sitting in a meeting and paying attention the entire time. So you know you're doing a good job when somebody turns to you and says, Jeffrey, you don't have any input in this? Oh, I do. Oh, I do. And the reason why this becomes good is that you paid attention, you listened, and you were actually analyzing the room. You were figuring out what everybody was doing in there. Again, you're being methodical, but I'm listening, I'm looking. I know that you have a striped shirt. I know that you have a little button. I don't know what the button is because I can't see that far. Oh, mortgage, I like that. So you start to look and pinpoint things. And then these register in your mind, and you start to think, okay, next time I see Patrick, I'm going to remember that Patrick is on and does something with insurance. So you start to pull all this information in. So you're funneling everything you can, which allows you to then start to execute. The more information you have about people, the more you can actually become their friend and become part of that situation. And that's the hard thing, is that for myself, wasn't very good at getting close to people, so I had to start to learn things about people that could actually show that I understood them and that I wanted to be part of the network and what they were doing. So be methodical, watch what people are doing, how they interact in a meeting, who are they speaking to, who are they sitting beside. All of these little things make a difference in the outcome you're going for. Catch the little things. And my favorite part about kind of while you're in these pitch meetings or in this meeting in general is listen and speak once. And the reason why this becomes important is because, again, your end goal is that you're there to close a deal. So listening to what everybody has to say, making sure everybody feels important, letting everybody vent, do whatever they need to do, and then at the end, will be able to say one or maybe two things. I don't want to make it so you guys won't say anything in a meeting when you go in there and be like, what's wrong with Bob? It's not about that. It's about the fact that you've just taken more time to take information in, register it, analyze it, and come back with something of a solution. When you're selling, people love people that can solve problems. If you're not in there solving a problem, you have no value. You're a solution person. You are selling. If you're not selling a solution, then what are you doing in there? So, if you listen and come up with the right solution to their problem, they will be eating out of your hand forever. We had a client the other day that came to us and they said, Jeffrey, we need to build this and we need it done in 6 weeks. And the team was working away on this. They came back with proposals. And they said, oh, it's high competition. You've got multiple people working on this. And I looked at it and I'm like, nobody in their right mind could do this in 6 weeks. You're going to fail. So we went in, we sat down the meeting, we got everybody in the room, we let them tell their story. And at the end, I just said, you know what, this is great. And I hope the company that gets this does a great job. But unfortunately, we can't take it because we're not going to be able to succeed and make you succeed in 6 weeks. But what I'm going to offer you as a solution is that the existing site and the existing e-commerce platform you have, we're going to modify that. We're going to give it a new look and feel so that we can do. And what that'll do for you guys is that when you have this 15 million users come in, you're going to have a solution that's already been tested, tried, and works. And then we're going to work on this other solution that's actually going to take 6 months to build because it's massive. And we're going to be able to take care of it that way. And we left it at that. End result, they decided to not launch the project in 6 weeks. And they decided to go with the direction that they could just update what they had and that we would take and build this on the back end, but help them succeed by getting to their end goal. So the solution was you took the time, you analyzed how the people, the players are, and you had to put a line in the sand. You had to decide that there wasn't anything further that I could do and I wasn't going to risk any other outcome. So these are the things that you have to do when you're obviously inside a room. So listen and speak once. Be calculated. So now you're getting through all of these great criteria, you're starting to move forward. Well, now it gets down to providing value. And what I learned over the last, 12 years of running my companies is that you have to think big, work small. And what I mean by that is, if I would have went in there and said that I could have built this big project, the 6-week project, there's no way in succeeding, would that outcome have been good for me or for the business? Probably not. I would have got paid, then I would have fought the rest of it in court because they would have sued me for not hitting their deadlines. And one of the requirements was that if we didn't hit their deadline, that we would pay them money back. So I'm like, who would take this? So you have to set the requirements, but at the end of the day, you really have to think big, which means come in with all of the ammunition, the team, the knowledge, the direction, the solution, but trim it down to something that actually is achievable. And achievable by everybody. So now you're going to have people believing in you. So we do the whole setup, which is we get you to an MVP, your minimal viable product. So inside of any sort of build, we do the same sort of setup. We don't want to go big, we want to go and try something small. So in any relationship, you don't meet somebody and get married 5 minutes later. You go through the process of getting to know them, learn things, date, all that good stuff. This is the exact same scenario. When you're going into a project, new client, nibble away at it, take small steps that get to the big picture. We're all eager to share how much knowledge we have and all the good things we want to do for them. But really, at the end of the day, nobody's going to say, here's $1 million. Even with startups, when we go and work with startups, we're not like, yeah, we're going to fund your company. So you said you needed 500. I've got $1 million. Are you willing to take that? It doesn't happen. So you have to really think about, if I take a step back and go a little bit slower, how can I build that project to success? How can I make sure they're successful? So think big, come up with all these great ideas and plans, and then say, here's what we're actually going to build. But now you know that we can think in the space that you want us to think. We can build the product to get you where you need to be, but here's how we're going to start it off. And that's just something small that slowly allows you to move through the cycle. And it gets people engaged and happy. So make sure that you're able to provide that value and they understand what that value is. My favorite of all of these, because how many people are new startup businesses or new owners or all that good stuff? Okay, so about a quarter of the room. How many people have been doing this forever? I love it. I love it. So one of the key things that I learned over time and I say key because I think we all tend to do this, was that when you start to sell, you continue to allow the line to drop. Someone will say, well, you're $150 an hour. This guy's doing it for $50 an hour. How are you going to compete? So you compete on price, compete on a bunch of different things, and you'll always seem to lower that line. I'm sure we've all done it to accommodate people. Well, one of the things that I learned, and a colleague of mine, him and I wrestled with this a few years back, was that I'm going to draw a line and I'm never going to go below it. So my rate is X, my company rates this, and this is what you get. If you don't like it, well, the world's big. So you can find someone that will accept both sides. What do you think the outcome was by creating this line? Sales decreased, increased. I lost friends. What's that? You put a value to it. So what you ended up doing is you created a value that said, I can't go below this. This is what I'm worth. This is what my company's worth. This is how we operate. So I implore you, as hard as it is to create a line. And that line, don't go below it. And the reason you don't go below it is because everybody can compete on price, but people can't compete on how you operate and how you do things. So if you're looking at this line, and I define this line, well, find solutions to solve the problem of cost or delivery of date, whatever those functions are, find solutions. So you can always close a deal by moving the line, by keeping your principles the same as they are, but finding ways to layer on good things that are going to help and bring value back to them and to you. And remember, this is a two-sided story. This is always not about you, it's about how do you make that customer happy. So in order to keep them as a long-term customer, you need to do things that will bring back value. So in the case of drawing the line, I set it at a cost and say this is the number I'm going to stay at. And then I start to layer on other pieces. Well, you're going to have this value, you're going to have a team that does this, you're going to have access to these people or this machine or whatever it might be. So you start to layer in value so they won't want to turn you away, but you kept your line of what your base principles are. And that's important to you as an early business or a late business, because eventually everything chugs down. And if you're being innovative, you should be able to always keep your price and value where it is, and people will come back for that. And what I did learn about that is respect. People respect you more when you don't push your line. The example I gave a while back was, if you all have kids, your kids will always push the line. They will drive you to create the line as far down as they can. But the point is that they will drive you. And the reason they do that is because they want to see where and how far you're willing to take it. And in sales, they do the exact same thing. So define your line. Don't let yourself go beyond that line, and you'll find that people will have more respect and more drive to want to actually be doing business with you, because it shows that you're assertive, that you're driven, and that you are going to accomplish what you said because you have strong principles. Which gets you into the art of the negotiation, which I think Pavel talked about the other day, which is awesome. So all these great things that you've done now, you've gone through, you're analyzing meetings, you're analyzing output, you're figuring out how do I attack a market, how do I go after people, how do I define my line. Now you start to think about, I got to execute this. I had all the right people, now I have to find the right teams. So inside of the execution, this is almost the biggest piece of your whole sales initiative. If you can't execute, then you just spent and wasted all your time selling for nothing. So a lot of the times with salespeople, they've told me over the years is that they didn't like selling because most of the time their team was very poor to support it. So they would only do a little bit of sales here and there because they didn't have the confidence in their team. So if you are a business owner, you need to ensure that you're building a strong team that's going to execute on all of the sales techniques that you're using. So execution doesn't mean that you just hand off as a salesperson. Hey, I closed this deal, see you guys. And you know what's funny is that over the years, I always told everybody that I am the best person at unlocking doors. You give me 100 doors, I'll unlock them all. But I will not remember what number, who was in the room, what they did. My team will go in and take care of that. Is that good or bad? Well, at the end of the day, once you open the door, you want to make sure you're in there and trying to build up new business. So if you don't have good people, you have to keep going back into that room and helping. And you have to keep cycling through and making sure that you're keeping everybody happy. So on that execution part, you have to make sure that you're still winning. And that winning comes from helping and supporting the execution, following it, making sure your client is aware of it, giving them updates, making them feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, you brought that relationship into that company. They want to make sure that they have one throat to choke. It happens to be yours because you're the salesperson. So you need to build that relationship, and you don't want to lose it, because relationships take a long time to build. Trust is hard to earn. So once you do have it, you need to foster it. It doesn't mean you have to keep going back to the well and bugging them, but what it does mean is that people want continuous collaboration. They want to know that you care. They want to know that you're thinking of them. So those little things go a long way. So in your execution plan, just make sure that it is the best, because that's what's going to deliver your next sale. That's what's going to get them talking about you at the next meeting. And then the next person's going to reference you. One thing we did, it was a couple years ago, we were working with a client. Well, their First National, I was trying to think, should I make another name up? And we started working with them about 8 years ago. And it was probably maybe year 5. And they had a change in the business. And they let all these people go, and a whole bunch of people shifted. And we had a very good account with them. And the people that we worked for happened to now no longer work there. So we started to kind of panic. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Like, these guys are like great client. So I would say we do what any great salesperson would do. I have no idea what that would even mean. But what we did is we actually went in and we had a meeting. We booked everybody in the meeting. We had everybody come in. And we talked with everybody, and we sat through how this was all going to work. And what I learned in the meeting is that 80% of the people in that room were all new to the space. So they brought in this whole new revolution of how they were changing to fit, into the banking world. So as soon as I left that meeting, I was with my person on my team, Allison, and we started thinking, oh my God, we're going to lose this account if we don't think of something good to help them stay engaged. They're all new. They're going to go to their old relationships. They're going to try and bring people in they did work with 10 years ago, and oh my God, this is crazy. So I had just finished reading a good book, and the book was called Switch, I think it is. And it's I gotta remember the guy's name. There we go. It's called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. So the reason why this became important was we went and bought a book for all of the people on the team. And we mailed it out to them. And I went to I think at the time she was the senior director of marketing, and that's who we were working for. So we sent everybody a book through Amazon. So everybody got it shipped. And the reason being is that they were under this huge stress of change. They were coming into all new roles. They had no idea what they were doing. Well, they did and they didn't. And we wanted to make sure that we were able to help them embrace that. So we bought them all the book. And then I actually sat down with the director of marketing, and I gave her the landscape of the business. This is how we've learned it. This is what we went through. This is who we worked with. And we did that, went for coffee, and started to build a relationship. I guess it's been 8 years now that we've had them a client. These people have all moved on. But what the outcome was is that we executed on being able to put together a plan that helped them transition into a new role. So you're always thinking ahead, trying to figure out how do I not only protect what you've created, but help those people that are inside that business comfortably work their way around. And we did that by utilizing a book that I had nothing to do with. So it was a good way to get them comfortable. But it also showed that I cared, and also showed that I had an understanding of their business, and that they needed to be able to understand also inside their own business. So how do I give them as much information as I could? So it was a good learning experience for them and myself. So at the end of all of this, you've now structured how awesome you're doing this work. It's moving along. You've got all these meetings. Everybody's interested in how you're closing business. The company's moving forward. Well, Why are you doing all this? Well, we originally started the conversation off by having a motivation. So your motivation has to turn into your long-term plan. What is your strategy? Why are you doing this? So as a first-time owner or as a new business, you start to have to, at the beginning of time, envision where you want to be in 10 years. You created the motivation that's going to drive you to get there. You've got this plan that you're putting into place. You've executed it. Well, now you have to start working on what that plan is. There was a book called World Inc., I believe was it. And what was really cool about World Inc. was that Nissan and Toyota were written about inside this book. And these guys have 25 to 50-year plans. You're like, man, I can't even plan like next week. And they would build these plans out, and the company would be on a trajectory to close those deals to get them where they needed to be. And I actually became a firm believer in this. And all the things I do now are planning for what I'm going to do in 20 years. And the reason that you say, well, that's kind of useless, you should be thinking about what you're doing, of course, but if you have a trajectory of where you're going, again, you start to do things to get there. Somebody used to say, if you write on the wall, I want to be a billionaire, you'll eventually be a billionaire. Well, we'll start with millionaire first. So the idea is that you'll start to envision how you're going to get to that end goal, which is I want to be a millionaire. How do I get to being a millionaire? And as you start to work through, you start to plan and build up and execute to get you there. So you're envisioning a future that you don't have right now. So I tell my students all the time, they're like, well, what should I do? I'm like, well, one, you got to network like crazy, get out and meet people, and start to figure out where you want to be in 20 years. Because what you do now is going to affect you in 20 years. And it doesn't click right away, and it didn't for me either, but once I started to plan and envision where I wanted to be, it made things so much easier. I invest in these companies now because this is where I'm going to be here. I put money here because that's going to go and grow to be here. So you do the same thing in your business. So focus on where you're going to end up. So I have many interesting stories, I guess, over time. But at the end of the day, you got to remember that you're always selling. It doesn't matter if you're meeting new people, just with friends, you're always selling who you are. You're always providing value, and you'll understand your own personality and how and why you're doing the things you're doing. I'm very data-oriented, analytical, and I know that when I'm uncomfortable, I talk a lot, which happens to be when I'm uncomfortable, which might be a lot of the time, I guess. Or I don't say anything, and people think there's something wrong with me. But I've at least understood my personality on how I operate, so I know where I can bring value. And all of these different types of things that are all big picture because we all live it every day. It's just taking the time to focus more on what you know and what you can do, and then figuring out how do I interact that with the other people out there. We're all different, but at the end of the day, we're all the same. And a funny example was last night, I'll utilize Katrina. She intentionally spilled wine on her shirt. I'm not sure she did intentionally, but it's more funny saying that. And what that did, I was like, so I asked, I said, so did a lot of people come up and talk? She's like, yeah, it's crazy. I had a lot of people come up to me and ask me about the wine on my shirt. I said, that's an amazing sales technique. She's like, why? And I said, because people need something to talk about. I said, years ago, I went to an event and I dressed up the craziest I could. It was Beer Festival. I don't know if everybody's been to Beer Festival in Toronto. This was like literally 20 years ago. There was 10 of us saying, yeah, we're at Beer Festival. Nobody else was there. And we started going there with funny hats and shirts and things like that, so we stand out. Maybe you're drunk, you can do it anyways, but we started doing that, and what it did is it attracted attention. People would come up to you and be like, oh my God, I love that t-shirt, that's so cool. Oh, I love that cigar you're smoking, whatever. So at the end of the day, the thing is you draw attention to yourself, and you draw people to come into you. So the stain on the shirt, the pin, these are all things that create uniqueness about you at the time, and those are going to create conversations. And really at the end of the day, when you're going to an environment like this, you want conversations. So in my class, when we first start off, everybody has to stand up in the class and give 30 seconds about themselves, and they need to say who they are, what their major is, and one thing nobody will know about you. Well, nobody will know anything about all of you, but the thing is you have one unique thing that defines who you are. And why do you share that? because there's only one thing I'm going to remember about you, which is the one thing that you do in business, and you do it well. So if you have one thing, people will always remember you by that. I have no idea what that one thing is I want to share with you guys now that I brought this up. I always go to the fall guy. I can hold my breath underwater for 2.5 minutes. Does that work? Is that helpful? Probably not. But at the end of the day, you have to have one unique thing. So think about what that is, but always remember you're outselling. And if the Jumbotron ever turns on you, make sure you've got the move, because that's what people are going to remember. Thanks, guys. Oh, and I actually will take questions. I shouldn't just be like, see you guys. So yes, any questions, any thoughts, comments? Yes.
Jeff, first of all, Frank was wrong. You didn't say awesome. So
I couldn't, man. There's so much pressure. I wrote this thing like 7 times, man. I was like, this has got to be good. People don't want to hear me tell funny stories. Maybe you do,
You
but
said it 4 times.
awesome. Different environment, I'd be saying it. I had probably said it 200 times last night.
So my question, Jeff, is you mentioned quite a bit about the being in the financial sector. Do you really look at vertical markets, both in your company in terms of who you're dealing with now as a business, as well as when you're investing?
It's an interesting twist. I'm a generalist. So I actually have never, when I look at something, I want to know everything. So I'm a research information junkie. If there's anything I do quite well is read a lot of information about a lot of things that probably have not brought a lot of value back yet, but they will in the future, I'm sure. And so when it comes to verticalizing and going after sales, I go after what I think is unique and different. And if I find something that is cool and awesome, I certainly dive right into it, and I will go pretty hard on it. It's kind of like a bull in China shop, or at least that was the nickname they gave me. So I just go right at it and make sure I learn the most about it. And the goal for me is I want success. I don't seem like I'm just all about win-win-win. It's a win for both sides. So in the banking vertical, we did do a lot and still do a lot of work in that space. Just because I think it's an older space that has been reinventing itself, and we felt we could certainly provide a lot of value and context into that. In the startup world, when it comes to investments, we've invested in, through the fund, and we're all in different areas, products, tech, you name it, across the board. And again, that's because there's value everywhere. You just have to be able to pinpoint what it is and how you can make a change and help somebody. And again, it's a gradual, slow change. You don't have to go in there and reinvent the wheel. Like Airbnb didn't start yesterday and everybody was like, amazing, I'm going to go sleep in somebody else's bed in another place. It had nothing to do with that. It was literally took 10 years to build a business of doing something different, and you have to put that trajectory in. It's going to take time. There's not any real overnight successes. They do happen, but they are rare. So, does that answer?
I'm getting pretty long in the tooth, and I'm really thrilled with your comments today because one of your big key points is networking, and look how many people are here networking. And working with some younger people that seem to think the world is surviving on social media and the webs and networking are in that regard. And even though it's changing, we still need to be face to face. I mean, is it going to change?
It's a good question, and the reason I enjoy this question too is that everybody's like, the millennials, they don't like this, they're against this, they don't like reform. Well, I don't know about any of those things, because at the end of the day, who are the people on the top? Well, all of you. So the millennials are pushing like crazy. They don't want this, but at the end of the day, there's also the pushback that happens in the economy or around the people that are around them anyhow. So yes, millennials probably don't like a lot of those things. I think a lot of the time we influence a lot of those things. Last night they did a rant on why banks are going to be out like the dodo bird, I guess. And yes, millennials don't like banks because they don't like control. But really, when you ask someone if they like banks, they're like, yeah, that's where money is. So, like, is it really as bad as we're making it out? No, but I think that the world is changing. We want to change it. We're trying to dictate what the millennials and the Gen X's and the Gen Y's want to do and what they want, just like they've done over the centuries. Is it going to change that you're not going to do face-to-face? I can buy on Amazon. I don't need to be face to face because I know what I want. If I'm going to spend $1 million or $10 million or $500,000 on something, I'm going to meet that person at some point in time face to face to learn about them and what they're doing, because at the end of the day, it's still protection. Would I go and invest in a startup company that I've never met and don't know anything about? Just take my money and run? Not if I want to help and build with that company. So there's different criteria you're going to set, someone else is going to set, and eventually in time, yeah, you'll be able to transact a lot more because everything's being broken down to little pieces, and you'll buy those little pieces. But I still think the value of face-to-face is always going to be there, because if it didn't, we run a video production side of things. We could have filmed all of this. You guys could have all been at home and nobody could have come in today. So there is a value that we all look for, which is personal interaction. As much as I'm great at hanging out in my basement doing my own thing, or in the woods or climbing a mountain, at the end of the day, you are still looking for interaction. People are still looking for hugs. People are still looking for those things, which brings value back to you. So I think no matter how you look at it, you're always going to be doing interaction and face-to-face. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Brian from StartTech. Tell me a little bit more about your pitch events. What are the biggest things that you've learned that you might have not even thought of? You're like, wow, I never even knew this. Or what's the biggest takeaways that you have from hosting your own events?
I guess there's lots of things I've learned. Every day I think I'm learning something new. The cool thing about the pitch events was it was my first time spending a lot of time in front of people. So I found that it took me about a year to get really comfortable in front of an audience. Maybe it would have been faster if I was doing events every single day. But when you're doing them a couple times a month, yeah, the comfort level was tough. I pace a lot. I think maybe I'm a little tired today, so I'm not running around like I normally do. But I do pace because my energy just like through the roof, and I got to get it through my feet to the ground or something. I learned that one, I think startups are amazing. I really do. I have for a long time. I think for 20 years now. Even in my Loblaws days, the really cool thing that came out of what I did at Loblaws is that I guess I tend to work a lot because it's what I'm good at. So at Loblaws, when I was working, the admin staff that worked at the front of Loblaws, they would see me come in early. I guess they wouldn't see me. Maybe they got me on camera or something. But they knew that I was there a lot. So they didn't know what I did or who I worked for, which was typical in Loblaws. Nobody had a clue what I did, which is the best way. And what they would do is they'd funnel all of the new tech that would come in. So I would have 20, 30 phone calls a day from startups across North America because I worked in IT and I worked in e-commerce. But what I did was I always took these startups and figured out who would they best benefit. I would rip through their pitch decks, I would send back changes, and then I would get them in front of the vice president of that division. And why I did this was because I just loved the fact that startups were innovative, they were changing the world, small or large, whatever it might have been, but I thought I could help them, and I did that inside the big engine. So I became known for that, so people would just send me so many startups. So I got to see so many cool products. When Salesforce first came off the line, all the way through any product you can name, I pretty much got to work with. And then I would sit down with these VPs at Loblaws, and one of the cool things that I did with these VPs is that I was just a third level admin when I first started at Loblaws. And I went and made sure that I knew every vice president in the company and up. And I wanted to know who they were, what they did, everything. So I researched the hell out of them. I go and made sure that I got to knock on their door and say hi. They'd be like, who the hell are you? Why are you in my office? I'm like, don't care. How you doing, buddy? I had no fear. So I made sure I got to introduce myself to all of them. And then what I did was I created a little database and I would email them all information because I mentioned I read a lot and research a lot. So I would find a ton of information and then I would articulate it to all the different personalities in Loblaws. So they all had a value for me. They all said, well, this guy provides me with unique, different things. So over time, these startups would come in, I'd start funneling them all to them, and then I would book a meeting, but I made sure I went to the first meeting. Because, well, I wanted to learn more too. And I wanted to be like, hey, I helped you find these guys. And so many times these VPs would be like, why the hell are you doing this? This isn't even your space, this is procurement. And I'd be like, just deal with it, man. This stuff's amazing. Look at this. So I learned a lot. And what that did is it allowed for me now, 20 years later, taking that same knowledge, learning from startups, it allowed me to get those startups in front of other businesses. So I became and still are a big advocate of startups. So I can now network with them quite a lot into other companies, just as Frank does on the sales side. He just knows where to go and how to methodically put that together. I do the same by understanding their tech and saying, well, I know this company doesn't do this, and I will get that startup in front of them and they can start talking. So I learned to be a little bit more adaptive to the innovation space. I do enjoy change. I'm very basic on the sense of most things, but I learned that the way their minds think and the way, they're producers. And I'll say that most of us in this room, 99% of us, are all producers. We want to build. And 1% of us want to sell. But you can't have a great product if you can't sell. We can all come up and build a great car and spend days and weeks and months and years doing it, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to sell that product. So you have to learn the skills that you suck at, and I think I focused a lot on the skills over the last 10 years, 20 years that I wasn't good at. And what I learned from those startups is that it takes a lot of work being a startup and being a company that way as well. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of help from people like you. So if there's anything I can do inside of a business, it's promote you guys to help startups. You work in big companies, help them out. Give them that first leg. I know that when we started OPN, the really cool thing that came out of OPN was we met Miller Thompson. His name is Alfred Apps. He's been a startup guy for, I don't even know, 40 years? Something like that. He knew every story. He knew the mayor when the mayor was like 10. Like, these guys knew everybody. And what he did was that he showed value in what we did. So the reason why that became pretty awesome was that I was like, man, we're doing all this work and no one seems to care about startups. Why not? And then Alfred Apps came in. And he started talking about, I like what you're doing, we're going to support you, we're going to help you build a fund, we're going to do all this. Like, amazing. Somebody else likes what we do. And that makes a big value, and that helps the startup. So I implore you guys to do the same thing, is that look at the startup, figure out how they can fit in your business, figure out how you can help them, because the more times you help somebody, the more times they're going to grow, and then they're going to take that same learning and help somebody else.
Xander Townend from mycleanandsobercoach.com. I've appreciated that you have given us all great value. It's certainly my sentiment. I'd like to know, what's the biggest problem that you have that you're looking for a solution for, so that since all of us are wanting to provide solutions, how can we help you as a way of giving back?
I like that. All right, I got to get a magic marker here. You know what, there's a lot of things that we can all do to help, and I do appreciate the nice comments as well. I think for me, when it comes to startup land or helping businesses or helping startups, I think the thing is like mentor people. You've all been around the block. Well, maybe. You should have. All right. I don't want to make any assumptions, but you've all done a lot of things. And I think what a startup needs the most is mentorship and help. So if you guys can take the time to work with a startup, I think you're going to see that there's a lot of value in helping and mentoring young people, because you have a lot to offer. And I think that would be the biggest thing that I see as a problem that we have, is that we don't get enough people that are sharing their experiences. I think they're afraid, they don't think they have any value, they don't have enough input or experience to share. And I would go against that and say that you all have a lot of value and a lot of great stories that you can help share to a startup. And the more times you reach out, and the more times when they reach out that you take the time to actually sit down, listen to their business, and figure out how you can help them, make an introduction for one person or to one person, that's going to go a long way. So I do sound like this crazy cheerleader for startups, but I do think it's a tough world, and just like it is in your own world when you're selling, but if you do take the time to help a startup, I think that makes a big difference in getting them to move forward. And that could be from an introduction to a designer or a sales lead, whatever that might be, because that one thing might turn their whole business around, and you had no idea that you had that one offer and that could do that. So something to keep in mind. On our end, we're always looking for great mentors, because we work in the Durham region as well as in Toronto, and we're always bringing startups and trying to figure out through the accelerator how we can help them more. So if you do have an interest in that side, You can send an email to info@opn.ninja. Katrina, Frank, Angelo, and myself, we're more than happy to engage with that and figure out how we can help get you guys talking and helping with the startups that we work with as well. Because there's a lot of ways to help the community grow. And we're all about community.
JP, that's a great segue. So when JP says startups, I don't want anyone to think it's always about technology. You know, we work with people making baked goods, we work with people making furniture out of rattan. It's all different. This kind of leads into a program called Up Next, which is for 18 to 29-year-olds, Durham region. They actually gave us the funds to put together an 18-day event to help them start a business. And there's about 32 mentors involved in making that happen. Some of them are in this room, right? So I think to your point, there is a great culture of wanting to share. And the more that we can share with each other, the better off we are. And what's really neat is this is the premises of this event. This is designed to bring in people like Jeffrey that can share with you his journey, some of his lessons, and at the end of the day, that's why we want to bring some of these startups here. We had a young girl last year, a company called Chip Treats, that we invested in money in, young girl at Trent University. Now she's on the circuit helping others and sharing her story to help us motivate. So when we think startups, it doesn't always have to be technology.
Exactly. So I guess, is there any other questions? So I'll leave you guys with one last thing, and what I recommend is that when you start to go through, take these 10 things, break them down to 5, however you choose to do it, but just think a little bit more about where you want to be. Where am I going to be in 5 years? How am I going to get there? And what do I need to do right now that's going to change the outcome for that? I said I was going to be the oldest living person in the world, so I started to eat healthier, do a lot of different things, so one day I can be the oldest person in the world. I don't know if that's going to happen, but shit, it's one hell of a goal to try to achieve. So, and I'm sure you're all going to be there at the same time when I'm 150. So, take those 10 items, and hopefully that was helpful, but figure out how you're going to get to that end goal. So, I appreciate all your time today. Thank you very much for everything, and have a beautiful, awesome day.
Still on? Okay, thanks again. Teresa had to fly. She's teaching it. Sorry, forgive me. Our next event is June 20th. As I mentioned, we have a startup. The company's called Rover. They're a startup out of Toronto that rents parking spots in the city. And this gentleman's got a great story, how he used to live in his parents' basement, and now he's got a company worth millions. So he's going to share that with you. This is our first long weekend. Please have an awesome weekend. Play safe, because we want you back here in June, okay? Thanks again, guys. Have a wonderful day.